Hi there, and good afternoon. It's canceling COVID. Our overall goal is to keep you and your family safe during the pandemic in this safe space. And you're pretty safe here, folks. You get real resources to address your COVID concerns and your questions. And we've got so much going on, so much to share with you. And, a lot of changes, a lot of updates. And so I can't wait to get in and start talking to you about this. How you doing on this Friday? We've got some great weather, that's for sure. Some nice cool temperatures in the mornings now and then sunshine. And of course, it's the Carolina weather at its best. But I want to also make sure I acknowledge our sponsors, Mecklenburg County Public Health, mecnc.gov. Thank you so much for your continued support. And Groundwater Solutions, Dr. Tracia Black. As I adjust my screen here, we're so grateful for all that you do. Keep in mind, and I saw a quote from Governor Roy Cooper this morning. He's exactly right. If you have questions, get off the internet. Call your medical provider. You can call Met County NC 980-314-9000. I believe is the number. They'll scroll back across the screen. Or Groundwater Solutions. All of these are resources that can help you get the answers to what you need. Now, we can't ignore what's happening in our community right now. National news. We can't ignore the drive-by shooting that has just broken everyone's heart, that took the life of a 3-year-old. What do you say? Charlotte Mecklenburg schools right now, they're, all in the news for the wrong reasons. Is some students, and it's personal for most mothers, personal for the community. For me, a graduate of North Mecklenburg, and to read that students from North Meck and Hopewell are involved. Folks, this is out in the county. This is not in the city limits. This is out in the county, exactly where I grew up, exactly where my roots are. And we're talking about a 3-year-old baby, a child, totally innocent, not involved in any of that nonsense, has lost his life. A drive-by shooting. And the fact that they are students expected to be involved. What do you say? Come on, parents. Come on. Bullets also grazed a 4-year-old, his sister. And so we're mourning the loss of this precious life. And perhaps you know that it's been tied into the death of a 16-year-old over in Trinity Park, which also North Mecklenburg area has been referred to as Northwest Charlotte. But we cannot ignore this at all. The violent threats that have continued, got kids afraid to go to school. In addition to North Meck, West Meck, Julius Chambers, Hopewell, all of this in the news for us right now. And this violence has got to stop, folks. It has got to stop, and we've got to stop talking about it. It starts with leadership. Our community leaders, the NAACP, they held a press conference. And this was to suggest one of the ways to focus on the impact of COVID, maybe having students focus on students' behavioral issues, calling on the district to develop a program that will address the mental and emotional impacts of students, bringing students and staff together in large groups after they were apart for more than a year. And it's interesting in talking to educators, and maybe our next guest is coming up. I'll wait and share that thought. But if my timing is correct, I believe that conversation or the press conference from the NAACP was the same day that the child got shot later on that evening, because I believe the press conference was in response to the 16-year-old that got killed by a 14-year-old. And we're talking about Charlotte, North Carolina. So my next guest, who is right here, she's a dear friend, and I appreciate all that she does out and about in the community and truly having a heart to serve. She's one of the at-large representatives on Charlotte Mecklenburg School Board, Miss Jennifer De La Hara. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. I was getting ready to share, and I think maybe it was you and I when we had the conversation. The children really have to learn how about going back to school, because they've been out of school for a whole year. So that's an adjustment in itself, is back in the classroom, back around all these personalities, back in order with all these rules. We've talked about so much, but did we have that conversation?
I don't recall that conversation in particular, but I think you're absolutely right. And I am certain that those conversations are happening, within our schools, because as our educators, and I use that word because it's not just teachers. Of course, we're
Right.
talking about counselors and psychologists and social workers and all the teacher assistants and all the folks really that are school based, student facing. As they were preparing this year to start, I mean, we knew that mental health and the well-being of our children was top of mind.
Yeah, it's not like no one wasn't aware because you kind of saw the impact throughout the year. I have so many conversations, and I know we get into some really deep conversations, like in the weeds. So I couldn't remember who it was, but since the beginning of school, CMS says that they found 5 handguns, 1 pellet gun, 5 cutting instruments, all seized at the local schools, and 4 young people have been arrested, which is now impacting their future. When you hear these statistics and you're right there, what comes to mind about violence involving our students?
Well, first of all, of course, a deep sadness, just a really profound sadness that our community is experiencing this.
Yeah.
So, of course, that comes to mind first. And then, secondly, I think about how violence has no place in our community. Children and families should feel safe wherever they live, whether they are our students or not. All children in our community need to feel safe and they need to feel cared for.
Well, you heard I quoted what the NAACP said in the press conference. I actually had another meeting I had planned to attend. Would you say CMS is already making those COVID related mental health efforts? And if so, kind of tell us about what they are doing.
Yes, certainly. Well, I mentioned some of the positions that we have earlier who are absolutely dedicated to serving our children, all of our children in our 180 schools that we have now. But certainly, in addition to the staff that was already there, have been talking out in the community about using some of our COVID relief funds
Mhm.
specifically to address mental health. So there'll be more coming on that as well that we'll be able to share in the future as those plans get put into place. But I will say, with regards to the NAACP's announcement, that we're very fortunate to live in a community where people want to help and
Yeah.
we welcome that help. So the staff is working with the NAACP and I believe it's called the Alternative to Violence team to engage students to learn more about what they need from not just CMS, but from the community. So ongoing efforts have been top of mind since the beginning of the school year, and we're going to continue to do everything we can to meet the students where they are, understanding that it's been a really tough year. I have 2 teenagers myself. And there's been ups and downs, and so we all have to understand that this COVID. And I'm glad you're doing this segment, canceling COVID,
Yeah.
because we certainly want to cancel it. Let's
Yes, we
let it
do.
be gone, let it be gone. But we all need to come together to do our part to recognize that people are being affected in multiple levels.
Yeah, and it's so many levels to this onion. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. And we thought about canceling because of the whole cancel culture. It's not always bad when you're dealing
Mm.
with something like COVID. So the efforts that you're making, I applaud you for sharing that information and for CMS. I believe one of the questions from the NAACP or requests is allow us to get back into schools. And that is how it starts. So that's great. And working with the community to have volunteers and people are getting more involved in the schools. Now, some of the efforts that you already started, of course, school has only been back in session. Is it a full week?
No, two.
2 weeks, not very
Yeah,
long. Yeah. So is it a little early to try to even comment on some of the response that you're
on the
getting?
results,
Yeah.
yeah, probably, with
Yeah.
just 2 weeks in. I just think it's safe to say that, efforts are being made. Certainly, all hands are on deck.
Mhm.
But let's not forget that, I spoke, and I do want to say this quickly. Because we do have this unusual infusion of some federal dollars to help us with COVID efforts. I do want to mention, though, that of course these are our statistics, and I wish I had them with me. I should have brought as far as what we're able to do with regards to counselors, social workers, and school psychologists. We're really below in Charlotte Mecklenburg the national recommended ratios for service. And so, it is important important to note that CMS, as part of our legislative agenda this year, presented to the Mecklenburg delegation to the General Assembly our
Okay.
request for increased funding for these efforts. And many of our delegates may file those bills. Unfortunately, they didn't make them out of committee. And so it's an ongoing fight in the budget battle going on in Raleigh. So I would ask also anyone listening to think about it, engaging politically as well, because we do need more resources, and many people recognize that, as well as with our county resources that have been cut with these specific initiatives. So it is a community-based problem, of course, and part of that is the community, I think, thinking about politically how we can engage and seek targeted resources to help these needs.
And I appreciate you making that point because there's so much effort around voting and get out the vote and making sure your voice is heard, but you also need to be informed and educated when you're casting the ballot on who is actually making these decisions that represent your mindset, your community. And I think
Mhm.
there's a disconnect there as well, because it's easy to look to the local school board and not realize that on the state level funding is a real issue, and as you just mentioned, on the county level. So thank you for pointing that out. Some
Sure.
people may not understand that connection. I see you guys hopping on. Jump in the chat if you have any questions or comments that you'd like to share. Again, our school board member, Jennifer De La Hara, out and about in the community, and just absolutely thrilled to have her join us. We had the chair on, at least ask you, I guess it's been maybe a week or so that she joined us as well. And that also speaks to your commitment, both of you guys, of
Mhm.
joining these platforms and sharing information. But let's talk about safety a little bit. We had the issue in Winston-Salem. God bless that whole situation, just so unfortunate as well. And we've experienced it here in Charlotte, in Charlotte Mecklenburg schools, unfortunately, the loss of a student. But what are some of the efforts that are being made to keep the kids safe at school and on the streets?
Yes, well, we have several strategies in place to keep students safe at school. I do want to mention, even the day prior to the Winston-Salem shooting, there was a shooting. I don't believe it resulted in a fatality, thank goodness, but in New Hanover County as well. And so it is important. Well, maybe not important, but I guess I'm saying is we've seen this all over, not just our
Mhm.
state, but our country. And
Right.
so as we as school board leaders communicate with other school boards across the nation, it really is a national phenomenon. And so I think all the more reason why we need hands on deck to address it. I will tell you that, we have resumed our safety screenings, which is when we go to random schools and screen students looking for illegal substances and weapons. And, so far those screenings this year, have resulted in, finding some of the weapons that you spoke about, including knives and even vapes. And so that practice is, continuing to happen. You mentioned a couple particular schools a minute ago. Over the past few days, we have had increased security there.
Mhm.
I did want to point out that I don't think that some of the online chatter proved to be credible threats at the school level. But nevertheless, we are taking them all very seriously and vetting them. I hate that it's sort of projected on to what might be going on in the school,
Right.
because this is a community issue, and of course they happen to go to our schools, but we don't
Right.
want to portray it that it's necessarily a fight like within the school, or
Right.
that there's a specific threat from school to school, because that has not been found out to date. It could be in a future date,
Right.
but we're definitely taking it seriously because the stakes are too high not to.
Have you all had the conversation? A parent was sharing with me yesterday about just putting the screening process in all the schools, the high schools. Has that ever been on the table? The metal
Um,
detectors?
Well, so it's a random process. My guess is it's because of being stretched with resources to be
Okay.
able to do it at all schools all the time, every
Okay.
day. So it is a random. They go around and spread out the resources that we have, including we have two canines. But I've not had that conversation, but I
Okay.
think certainly it's a conversation we need to have, and hopefully we could deploy and receive some extra resources to be able to do that if that's what's determined is in the best interest of our students and staff.
That's what I'm sure the parent would love to know, because that was a
Mhm.
question. So, speaking of safety, this surveillance program, is there something different that's going to launch in addition to what's happening or what we just spoke about?
Um, so are you referring to the surveillance around the COVID testing?
This question is around safety, and I think that's what we just referred to, the random and what's happening around the system right now, and it seems to be working, correct?
Yes. Well, yes, we're finding things, and
Right.
that's unfortunate also, but that's
Yeah.
what it's there for, right?
Yeah.
To be able to recover both illegal substances and weapons. So it does work. And it's unfortunate that that's where we are.
Yeah.
In our society as a whole, but we're going to make all the efforts that we can. Let's keep in mind though that of course, we want to call on the community's help,
Right.
right? And then the sense of if you see something, say something. This is so important. And
Right.
also, I would call on our community members who do own weapons to make sure you lock them up. We
Yeah.
find, I'm not suggesting in this particular case, because I don't, these cases, I don't know all the details yet of how they obtain the weapons, but I do know that many times children obtain weapons from the home or the car of their parents or relatives, their family members. And so I think there are many things we can do in the community to help educate and
Mhm.
call people who do, own guns to keep them locked up and safe. And prevention is really key.
So, is there a surveillance program around COVID? I mean, because there obviously is a protocol in place. The new numbers show children make up 30% of North Carolina's COVID cases.
Mhm.
We've seen the cases at about 100 Charlotte Mecklenburg schools. Um, the safety protocol that's in place right now, you feel comfortable that that is working? And is there any type of other program that you guys are looking at launching?
Yes, well, I do believe our safety protocols are working.
Okay.
I mean, certainly when we report out our number of COVID cases, that's not suggesting necessarily that the spread, happened at the school,
Right.
although I'm sure sometimes that does happen. But of course, people can be out on the weekend or in the evenings and bring COVID back in. So it
Right.
is important to understand those numbers are not necessarily spread that happened at the school. So relative to how many cases we have, I think that it's the masks are working.
Mhm.
So of course we want to continue. We will continue that practice as it relates to the surveillance testing that we're going to be doing. That will be a new program.
Okay.
We just got assigned our state approved vendor in mid August, and we're able to now meet with them. I mean, of course, we would have loved to have started the program, before the year got started, but we
Right.
didn't have access to that vendor. And now our staff has had 2 or 3 meetings with them at least to start to develop a program. Actually, on Tuesday night at our board meeting, I would encourage everyone to watch.
Mhm.
We'll be going into more detail about how that program is going to roll out, where they're going to be doing pooled testing, where they'll go into a whole class and swab the whole class, take it off site to be tested. And if there's a positive, then come back and do more specific testing. So that will be rolling out, as well as eventually we would like to have diagnostic testing, which
Oh,
would be if your child has symptoms, then you could be tested on site, 15 minutes later, find out if you're COVID positive or not. Of course, we know that many times kids don't show symptoms, but I do think eventually when we get to that point, they'll be super helpful. I know my son in particular had some symptoms a couple weekends ago, and I felt compelled to take him on Monday morning to get a test because I
uh-huh.
couldn't send him back, of course. And
Right.
he was negative, and thank goodness. But that's the sort of commitment that families are going to have to make. And I'm fortunate that I had time on Monday morning to take him and we were able to follow that process. But I think eventually, as we get more resources and this vendor hires their staff to be able to do this surveillance testing, then hopefully we'll be able to eventually move to where we can do some diagnostic testing as well, which would be super convenient for families because it's difficult on all of us.
Absolutely. And thank you for sharing that information. And because that's the program that I was trying to get to, just went another direction. So thanks for sharing that as well. Well, I appreciate your time. I would love for you to share any final thoughts that you may have. I want to say thank you all so much for making the decision about masks. You didn't waver. You said masks are
Mhm.
required. There are some school districts there that are seeing the results of given that option. Charlotte Mecklenburg Schools is not one. So kudos to our school board for doing that. Anything else that you would like to share?
Just two quick thoughts. As I think about how our community will respond, I find sometimes that we often work in silos, and I know that's spoken about a lot. But I think now more than ever, given the severity of the impact of COVID, that any silos that are there, it's time. It's been time. But let's just make it a priority to bring silos down. City government, county government, school board government, all of our community partners, grassroots folks, private organizations. Let's work together to solve the multiple challenges that we have. And then, of course, I would be remiss as a publicly elected official if I didn't encourage anyone who's listening to go get vaccinated. That is our number one defense against this virus. And of course, I want to encourage everyone to access that resource as soon as possible so we can cancel COVID.
Thank you so much. I can't let you go though without also sharing that she is a candidate for our county commission. And as you've heard her express very eloquently her concern about the community and how we can all work together in unity to make our community so much better. We deserve so much better here in the Charlotte Mecklenburg. So for those of you, if you want to get in and just find out more information, I'm not allowed to endorse. Clearly, you can see that I have a lot of respect for her. She is a candidate currently at large, Charlotte Mecklenburg School Board, but a candidate for our Mecklenburg County Commission. So thank you again so much for taking the time to talk with us.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Yes. Great stuff. We get you resources and it's real talk. That's information from an elected official sharing her thoughts and information about our schools. We got some great folk in our community. And I did say great folk. That's just me talking like me, that really, if you need anything or have questions or need information, seek these individuals out. We've elected them and they owe it to us, especially with what's happening now. Now, if anyone has hopped on, I'm sure if you're like me, you're just taking in all this information, but I would love for you to share your thoughts in the comments, any feedback that you might have. We're not really shifting gears though, because we're going to now talk about the stress of COVID and how it's helping to fuel violence in schools and what can be done to keep our children safe. Please, please share your comments. If you have a moment, just hop in the chat. I see you all have hopped on, so we love your feedback. And if you don't want to make the comments, because obviously your name shows up in the chat or for whatever reason, feel free to share. This conversation continues once we're off the air, and we've got some exciting ideas as we look to expand our audience. But now I want to bring in someone also that's working really hard, and I'm excited about this conversation as well. She's with the Jamie Kimble Foundation of Courage, and they've got some exciting news to share. Sherill, Carrington, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited. Yes, very excited to be here.
Yeah, well, Sherill, I'm excited to see that you're leading up this effort. And of course, the Jamie Foundation, Jamie Kimble Foundation of Courage, it's been around for a long time. I'm very familiar with it. Boots on the ground to address one way COVID is affecting students mentally and physically. I want you to kind of go into, of course, the foundation deals with domestic violence, and anyone in this area that's involved in or have a pulse on the community kind of know the backstory of what happened and how the organization was formed, but they may not be familiar with all the work that you guys are doing. So can you kind of speak on that for a minute?
Yes, definitely. As you mentioned, the foundation being formed by former Deputy City Manager Ron Kimble because of the untimely death of his daughter. She was in an on and off relationship. And when she finally decided to end the relationship, her offender asked to meet with her one last time. And so she did. And unfortunately, she was shot once, then shot again, which ultimately killed her. And then he drove up the road just less than a mile and then shot and killed himself. Mm-hmm. One of the things that Ron and Jan Kimble said immediately after this happened, they were interviewed. And the questions that were asked of them that stuck with them was, did you know the warning signs? And it was at that moment, Ron and Jan said, we have to do something. We have to form an organization that prevents this from happening from anyone else. Mm-hmm. So to your point, Tonya, the foundation was formed and we are truly focused on prevention. And that's not what a lot of people focus on because yes, you have to be available for direct services when it happens, but what are we doing to help people who come across it and don't know how to handle it?
Right.
So this is what the Jamie Kimble Foundation for Courage does. We have some great program that I'm extremely proud of is we work with teens because we all know that many of our teens, including what's going on today, as you've talked about earlier, with a lot of COVID, of course, with mental health issues, frustrations become about, and a lot of times they don't know the right way to be able to communicate effectively with friends, family, and or partners. So we have what we call a Teens for Courage Club. We also focus on and work with corporations to help
You
them
stole
create.
my thunder already. I wanted to talk more.
I'm sorry. I'm
That's
sorry.
all
I'm
right.
sorry. I'm gonna back it up. I'm gonna back
That's
it up.
okay. Well, just hold that thought for 1 minute though, because I want to go back to the Teens for Courage and highlight some of the other just what you guys are doing so much in the community. But I also wanted to talk about this whole partner related violence before we go into that, because I know you're launching something really big and you kind of touched on it a little bit. And I think it's tied in with the whole teens part, is it not? So
Yes, it
I want the
definitely is.
drum roll. Yeah, the drum roll for that, because that's huge. And I think, yeah, I think that's huge. So, but when you hear all this violence and everything, what really comes to mind? And you were starting to kind of sum that up. When you hear about all the violence that's happening, the mental health, domestic violence can't be lost in all this, because clearly you all are trying to be proactive, which ties in with prevention, correct?
Yes, definitely, definitely. Trying to be proactive because as we look at, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of times we don't know how to exert whatever feelings that we have. So there's a lot of frustration behind that. So it comes out in a negative way.
Yeah.
What we want to do is equip people with the resources and tools to be able to communicate effectively, to be able to give people the boundaries, to be able to think through and process what's going on. And like I said, we know that we need to start at a very early age. Jamie's untimely death happened when she was 31 years of age, but we know that we need to go younger than just even young adults. We need to
Yeah.
go as far as what we're doing right now, and that's with teens. And we know that even in my age, and I have a 15-year-old, I have a teenager, and even though I think I'm a cool mom and can understand the language, I have no idea what they're talking about most
I
of the time.
know. So go ahead and talk about this domestic violence outreach that you guys are doing in CMS. You know, this
Yes,
whole idea, and has it officially launched or it's launching? Tell us more about it, the teen program. I'll
it
talk
is
more about the
official.
other program. Okay.
No, no problem. It is officially launching. We are in several CMS high schools right now. We are in Olympic High School, and we're also in, yes, Myers Park.
Okay.
Those are new clubs, and our goal is to be into every high school within CMS. We want to create and produce and partner on behalf of our Courage clubs. Our clubs are teen led. That's the beauty of the club because they get to speak their language. What we
Yeah.
do is we provide the resources and the education for them to bring about the awareness. That's one of the requirements. It has to be student led. And
Yeah.
what we do is we help provide engaging ways. And believe it or not, it's really fun and creative ways. So let me give you an
Feedback has been
example.
positive. Feedback has been really
Very responsive.
okay.
We put on a yearly Teens for Courage Summit. Last year was our first year was virtual. This first year we did it, it was at Carowinds. And Tonya, we had over 250 high school students from North and South Carolina representing 50 high schools. I
Wow.
was shocked to get
Yeah.
high school students on a Saturday for 6 hours,
That's
and they were
amazing.
engaging. And I'll tell you, not only were they engaging, we made sure that parents were not allowed to attend, but
Okay.
we made sure we had counselors and social workers there in case any of the information shared triggered any of the students, which it did not. But I was amazed at how they spoke up. They talked about some of the challenges, things like cyberbullying,
Yeah.
from getting context of mean messages on their phones. How do they deal with that? We worked with CMPD and we brought them in and they talked about the legality of some of the things the students were going to. And guess what? As we all know, as adults and parents, they were shocked. They were unaware of what those consequences meant, right?
Wow, that's great to hear that, and that's some exciting information. So, the feedback has been really positive. What would you say, though, the partner-related violence in Charlotte Mecklenburg schools is it a big issue, or do you guys have any numbers on it? as far as it really adding or stress from the pandemic, the huge impact it's had? Like, have you seen the spike?
We have seen, so here to your point, Tanya, the numbers are would seem low, and let me tell you, let me speak to that. They would seem low only because, of course, last year we were in a COVID situation where people
Right.
were not in school. But we do know, in actuality, when working with many of our partners, those numbers were really higher than expected, and it
Right.
was higher than expected because the school officials and or partners that we work with may not have had the access. But
Right.
as we were able to go back to students and work with them virtually, we gave them the platform to be able to tell us what their concerns were. And I have to tell you, the students are on it. They have been asking for this. I mentioned Olympic High School. It was a student that attended our summit in February from Olympic High School. She called me personally and said, Miss Carrington, how can I get this club at Olympic High School? A high school student, and she was a
Good.
freshman. She's
Yeah.
an incoming sophomore now.
Yeah, that's some exciting news. And I'm excited that you all are forming this, because one of the efforts I do around my nonprofit is to support domestic violence awareness. And speaking of that, I'll see you all on next Saturday, or
That's right.
from tomorrow. Looking forward to you all coming out to the Praising the Park event at Smithfield Park. But let's talk now, because I know Ron and his wife, and I know the good work that they put in. And obviously, you a great addition. What are some of the other programs that you had where I had to kind of jump in? Now, share
Yes.
some of the other programs that you all have.
Well, and you're right, Tanya, because for our listeners, she has been involved and she's known us for a while, and we love her partnership. Tanya definitely is aware that we hold an annual event where it is our Women for Courage, but yes, it's for men as well. And it's an opportunity for people to hear from others and understand that it is an epidemic in our community. So there's opportunity to learn resources this year. It will be virtual. It's October 14th. So we'll give you more information to attend. It's open to anyone. We also have our employers workshop, as Tanya talked about earlier. And that is very important because many employees want to understand and know that their employers support them.
Right.
They're going through a really, really tough time. So we work with partners. Mainly our big partner is Bank of America. They have one of the greatest processes in place and strategies that work with their team members, that if they or a family member is going through this, they assure them that they will help them with resources to be able to uproot their family, to help with childcare, to make sure their job is still waiting for them as they overcome and navigate through this horrible system, unfortunately, of domestic violence. We also, Tanya, something else that's really cool that's going to be launched at CMS. We have Healthy Relationships Curriculum. We've partnered with NAS, which is National Amateur Sports in Charlotte, and Game Plan, and Coca-Cola Bottling Company. We have a curriculum that will be, it's healthy relationship curriculum. It's bystander, it's cyberbullying, as well as the warning signs. And it will all be done on the student's phone and or in on their computers. And the beauty of it, we are making sure that every student has access to the curriculum. So we're partnership by starting out with the athletic teams, and then it will be scalable out to all of the students. So, gosh, a lot of great things happening at the Kimbles.
With you all, and shout out to Coca-Cola. They are supporting
Yes.
my event, Praising the Park, as well. So, Mrs. Sherill Carrington, the Jamie Kimble Foundation of Courage, the great work in our community. As we wrap things up, is there anything else you would like to share?
One thing I want to share is thank you for putting up our information. If you want to know more about what we're doing and or support us, please contact us or go to info@jkffc.org. It's real out there. Tanya had asked me what numbers. Nationally, the national number alone is devastating. 1.5 million high school students experience physical abuse from a dating partner. And whether we as parents and adults want to admit it, our students are entering into relationships, and we need to be there to support them to be able to navigate that relationship. And we want to do that and help you with the resources and the tools to be able to have not only a healthy conversation, but a successful conversation.
And I'm sure you could use donations as well as volunteers.
Definitely. Thank you for
Yeah.
bringing that up. Please
Absolutely.
donate. Go to our website at jkffc.org. Go to our site. And for our teens, we also have a Teens for Courage website. So just for those teens who want to be able to speak the language and know what they need to do, go to our teensforcourage.org. Again, donations are welcome on both. It allows us your resources. Your financial support allows us to continue providing these programs that help not only our teens, but others in the community to be able to prevent and stop intimate partner violence before it begins.
Oh, great, great stuff. We got to keep working. Just keep working.
Yes, ma'am.
So thank you again, Sherill Carrington, the
Thank
Jamie
you.
Kimble Foundation of Courage. I appreciate you taking the time to talk with us. I'm so appreciative of our guests today. Some really great information. And you can see we've got some good people in the community, put in some work in. We just have to recruit more and support what we have. Jennifer mentioned not working in silos, but work together. And I'm all about working together to improve our community, our lives, our youth. We've got to pay attention. There's so many conversations I could go off in with this domestic abuse and domestic violence. Maybe one day I'll get an opportunity to share why it's so near and dear to me. But my time is up, my friend. I've gone over just a little. I owe my producer probably lunch, dinner, and everything else that I can throw at her for just tolerating with me and making sure we're on point and that we are staying on the air and doing what we need to do. So thank you, Amelia, as always. And as always, life's challenges make you better, not bitter. I'll see you this Sunday, 7 a.m. Sounds of Inspiration. Tune in, 1033, 100.5. Thank you to Mecklenburg County Public Health. I appreciate you guys. mecnc.gov, mecnc.gov, as well as Groundwater Solutions for your support. Enjoy this wonderful weather. Have a great weekend. Be safe and make sure you love on one another. All right? Talk to you